Welcome to Building the Future, hosted by Kevin Horick. With millions of listeners a month, Building the Future has quickly become one of the fastest rising programs, with a focus on interviewing startups, entrepreneurs, investors, CEOs, and more. The radio and TV show airs in 15 markets across the globe, including Silicon Valley. For full showtimes, past episodes, or to sponsor the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com.
Welcome back to the show. Today we have Ahola Ward. She's the CEO of Veritoken, an author and futurist who has been dubbed the mother of startups by CNN. Anne, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me today.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the show. I've known who you are for a while now, but maybe before we get into what you're doing today, let's get to know you a little bit better and start off with where you grew up.
Sure. I am a Canadian born, but I grew up in the great state of Texas.
Okay, where in Canada were you born?
I was born in Toronto, and then when I was very, very young, we moved to Calgary, and then we moved to Houston when I was 7.
Okay, very cool. I'm actually born and raised and still live actually in Edmonton, so about 3 hours north of Calgary.
I detected it. I detected a hint of the Canadian in there.
I figured usually other Canadians can tell, right?
Yes, but I didn't call it out because,
good.
I figured we'd get to it. But yeah, I absolutely, I always love speaking with other Canadians.
No, very cool. So you went to university. What did you take and why?
So I went to the University of Texas at Austin, and I had already started I was there in Austin at the start of the height of the startup boom.
Okay.
So the .com boom, and so I was a developer by night. I was a web developer and DBA, and I did a bunch of other jobs. And what I was doing at work did not reflect what was being taught in computer science, so it was behind. So I just took anthropology because my parents said, you should study what's interesting to you. Don't study what you think you should do as a trade necessarily. Go get educated. Go follow what you find interesting. And so that's what I did. So I studied anthropology with a minor in business, and which I used to always say in interviews, monkey business.
Interesting.
But anthropology gave me a very solid foundation for what I would use later in marketing. So development to me, I wasn't sure what I was doing with it, but it was like the most exciting thing at the time. And so school, there was no school for what I would later then do. It just didn't exist yet, that kind of a course.
Sure. So you get out of school, walk me through your journey with some career highlights along the way to what you're doing today.
Sure. So I had various jobs doing development, a little bit of design, and I, was I think I was okay at it. I don't know that I was the greatest developer ever. I can be honest about that. But the turning point for my career was when I landed a job at Apple.
Okay.
I had, so I worked in tech support. One of my jobs in college was tech support. And I took that job seriously, even though it was, not a real job to me. I treated it as one. And I was there when OS 9 and OS 10 launched.
Sure.
And so I wrote a little JavaScript that disabled the launch of the classic environment because all the tech support people were so annoyed by it because it would just freeze your computer. It was like a weird, awkward transitional time.
Okay.
And so I passed this around, and so this one department got it. I had no idea. And so years later, when I went into interview, they're like, "Oh yeah, you're that girl that wrote that JavaScript. That was so cool. Everybody used it." And so by taking a not really very serious job seriously and adding value, it completely was a rocket ship ride for my career, because Apple was where I realized I'm not the person that builds the pages anymore. I'm the person who's figuring out what's on them and why and measuring. And, this is where I became fascinated with analytics. just think of the data that Apple has, right? Like
Sure.
you could look at information that was so powerful. And so I realized there was this whole other world, and got into internet marketing early. And so I just sort of kept in what my parents always said, which is follow what interests you. So then that morphed into SEO. So first few jobs after Apple, there may be one or two more. And then my husband and I moved to New York, and the economy collapsed.
Okay.
And around 2008, 2009, and I had a mentor say to me, my husband and I both lost our jobs within a week of each other. And
Wow.
she said, with your skills, I think you do really well on your own.
Okay.
You keep going into these jobs, and you keep going into these departments, and you keep turning around these companies and training the staff, and then they let you go because they're like, well, we don't need you anymore. You keep building these programs, and then, why don't you just do that for yourself? And she really got through to me, and that was the last that I ever had traditional salaried job. I went out on my own after that because I was like, you know what, you're right. I can take these skills on the road, and I did, and that was, 10 years ago.
That's very cool. So walk me through the last 10 years up until Veritoken, and then let's dive into that.
Sure. So after the economy collapsed, we wanted to get out of that sort of, and everything was gray. It was like the world didn't have color in it anymore. It was, I don't know how to describe it, but we just knew we had to get out of New York. So we landed in California, which is where one goes as a tech person. And
Sure.
We kind of figured that would be where, innovation would be happening, and we were right. And we've been in California ever since, and so in Silicon Valley. And so I started, kind of going into companies as a consultant, and basically helping CMOs govern what's going on in their department, because a lot of CMOs just weren't trained in the ways of internet marketing, SEO, PPC, all of these things. They were emerging.
Sure.
And so people really didn't know how to manage it. And so I went in I kind of started as a cleanup person, where I go in and interview staff, figure out who was doing the job. And then I kind of thought, okay, well, this is negative. So I ended up becoming the person who built a team. So I quickly realized I couldn't do it alone anymore. So I built a team and started an agency with a partner back in 2009, which is my agency, Circle Click, which still continues to run and is actually thriving.
Very cool.
And I kind of became this person who built a team of I found that most startups, if they're lucky, have a developer who will kind of update their website for them or will help them if they need something. And so what I found is that my most effective method of doing SEO was bringing in the team that could execute. And so I've had some terrific gains over the years. I mean, I've worked with Twilio, Heroku, HP, like
Nice.
all sorts of,
all the big names.
household brands. Yeah. And because I have figured out, a path to scalable growth for online marketing, that opened a lot of doors for me. That brought me a lot of success because I was part of everyone else's success. And so it really was a thrill ride for a long time. And then things kind of changed when O'Reilly approached me about writing an SEO book, which was a dream come true for me because I got my foundation in tech from reading O'Reilly books.
Sure. I think, most people did, right? In the early days. And still do, to be fair. They still do. But they were literally the first people doing it, in my opinion, anyway. And I think a lot of people credit their whole career to them, right?
Well, absolutely. I unfortunately had to have a back surgery in college, and I was on my back for a couple months recovering, and I read those books.
Yeah.
And got tired of watching soap operas, and so I was like, I got to do something with my brain here. And there it was, and there I started coding, and there I taught myself, more about design, and that parlayed itself into the most powerful career move I could have made for myself because I used O'Reilly books as a tool, which is what they were meant for.
Sure.
And so my first actual coding job years ago was converting O'Reilly books from PageMaker to HTML. So
Oh,
it's like I had
interesting.
yeah. So it was a great idea, but the hardware was people were still using CRT monitors. That was too early. We didn't have slick tablets back in
Right.
2000.
No, fair enough.
But anyway,
No, that's really
so
cool.
yeah, so writing the book was really where, the another shift happened for me, because it felt like, okay, I've got a conclusion point here. I have shared all my secrets. I have published my playbook.
Okay.
And it just and that's when consulting started to feel like not enough for me anymore. And so, yeah, so that kind of felt like a conclusion, right? Writing a book, putting all your stuff out there. I mean, SEO is always changing. Web marketing is always changing. The landscape is a constant, revs of innovation. And that's why I love it. But at the same time, I'd been doing it so long, I was like, okay, is this what I want to do? And so that's sort of where things shifted for me. And I decided I think I'm going to start going into these startups.
Interesting. No, fair enough.
Yeah, and so that's where the shift happened, I'd say 2-3 years ago.
Okay. So walk me through how you came up with the idea for Veritoken, and what exactly is it?
Well, great question. So Veritoken really truly is born out of the desire to revisit the idea that we just have to blindly hand over everything we have to these centralized services, the Facebook, Googles, Twitters of the world. And I have always been one of those people that rejects what they're told if it doesn't make sense, or if it, I feel like it's at someone's detriment. And I feel like as consumers, our addictions to all these social media services and, these hosted solutions are sort of, they're akin to cigarettes, right? Like I've read that article recently. And so I really wanted to come up with a way to make impact. And I've been tracking the blockchain for quite a while. I was the first agency in San Francisco to take Bitcoin as payment. I resurfaced the old blog post to prove it with somebody recently. I was like, no, I put my stake in the ground here.
That's
awesome.
I've
been involved. Yeah, so I've been involved in the space, but I was one of those who was sort of waiting and watching for it to mature. And then in the last few years, it's become apparent to me that was just not happening. And so people like me who are futurists and see things need to come in and start making the change we want to see in the world. And so Veritoken represents to me a way for me to make a mark on the world. And it is the first time I've been the CEO of a funded company. And that's a pretty exciting thing. To be a funded CEO in Silicon Valley, and it took me till age 40 to do it. But, what we're ultimately trying to do is facilitate the adoption of a particular type of token called a non-fungible token.
Okay.
And we believe that this is what's going to give power back to people. So the idea is that, we don't want to continue to rely on these big services and just keep handing them our data while they spy on us.
Interesting.
It's time to revisit what our agreement is about how we want our data to be used, because people don't even think they have privacy anymore. And to a large extent, they don't, but that doesn't have to be the way that it is. I refuse to accept that that's how the world has to work.
No, I 100% agree with you. I'm actually, we'll get into it in a little bit, but I have some questions for you that I've been selfishly quite fascinated by this whole space for a number of years now. But I want to dive a little bit deeper into what exactly Veritoken actually does and how do people actually use it?
Sure. So we just, on April 3rd, launched our secure token offering, STO.
Yep.
And that means that we are now a public company. So
very cool. Congrats, by the way. That's huge.
Oh, thank you. Yes, and I'm the first woman to complete an STO under the 884 standard, which is the new standard, which is particularly exciting because that means that my token holders are not just token holders, they're also shareholders.
Very cool.
So the 884 gives a lot more power to the people, and that's what needed to happen, and that's why there's so many failed ICOs, because people just took the money and ran, and they didn't really give much to the people that were giving to them. And so this is a sort of different model. So the focus has generally been, and I've only been CEO since January, but in that time, we have filed a patent. We actually have another one ready to go. We have 2 demos. So what we're working on solving is not the notion of identity on the blockchain. We're physically trying to give tools that allow people to embed whatever information they want securely and privately on the blockchain.
Okay.
So,
interesting.
So that could be whatever you want it to be. It could be a driver's license. It could be your DNA. It could be a concert ticket. It could be, anything that can be virtual. And so it's a lot of education. We've been spending a lot of time educating people, educating investors, educating, partners, and sort of how this technology truly works. And so there's been a lot of that as well. And it's interesting to me how many people are interested in it, but really don't know how it works. And that's for good reason, because a lot of people don't know.
Sure.
And, why would you? It's not user friendly at this point in time. And that's something that we're working to try and change.
Sure. Yeah, because, well, as somebody that is a designer by trade that has kind of, well, I would say I'm a terrible developer at best. It's hard for even somebody like myself to struggle through some of this stuff. And even some developers have problems with it. And obviously the average person, I think, doesn't even have a chance at it at this point. But I think what you guys are doing, you guys will be able to solve that in probably a pretty short period of time. Is that fair to say? Yeah, that's a very simplified version of what you guys are doing, but is that fair to say?
Yeah. I mean, not unfair.
Okay. So how do people actually go about using your technology to do that then?
So we have what's called an MVP, which is minimum viable product.
Sure. Okay.
Which you have to have, that in your white paper. There are certain things you have to have for your public offering.
Sure.
But I'm going to have to say, quite honestly, that means minimum.
No, fair enough.
So right now, I would say our second demo we've developed that is not, the patent is not, that paperwork is not completed yet, so my attorneys would be quite mad at me if I talked about it. But essentially, we're talking about something that's going to be like a phone app. It's something that would have QR codes that you could scan. It's we want it to be user friendly as possible.
Sure.
Because I think that's the number one issue crypto is facing right now as a whole. Even just buying Bitcoin is something that I typically see people struggle with. So we're looking to make it as easy as possible, wrap it into a mobile app, and just, make it intuitive as humanly possible, because otherwise it just doesn't work.
No, very cool. Yeah, no, I agree. I think it is challenging, and I think what you guys are doing and working towards that is very much needed for, well, everybody, technical and non-technical, right? And everybody in between.
Right.
So
absolutely.
Oh, keep going.
Absolutely. Sorry. Oh, no. I was just like, yes. I very much agree with that point, because I think, one of my mottos in life is that when technology is not accessible, it is limiting.
Sure.
So there are people in this world who are left behind by certain systems, certain technologies, because they're just not accessible to them, and that really stinks. And so as technologists, we have to be stewards, and we have to say, okay, this is how we're going to help the rest of the world. And if we're not doing that, I don't know what we're doing, because it's just going to create divides. Sure. And, I really hate it when older people are left out, lower technical, not as technical people are left out. I just don't think it's fair. So that's really one of my great passions.
No, I 100% agree with you, because it's interesting, because obviously, and I don't know if you want to name names or not, or we can name names. I don't have a problem naming names, but it's interesting to me that the biggest companies in the world basically know so much about you, for better or worse. I'm one of the people that I'm fine with certain companies having a lot of information about me. Other companies, it makes me very uncomfortable, which I know is kind of a weird thing to say. But for example, I love the fact that I give Google more data than probably most people do, because of the conveniences that provides me. But I would never give that same data to Facebook, for example. And just because I just don't trust them like I trust Google. And I know that some people would argue, and I have this debate sometimes with other people, that maybe they're both evil or they're both not evil. It doesn't really matter. I've just made that kind of choice, right? Where I know a lot of people are like, well, I use an iPhone because it's more private. And my argument to them as well, like, it gets hacked all the time. And the argument for that is, well, the only people with crappy passwords got hacked. So like, it's kind of a rabbit hole that we don't really necessarily want to go down into. But I guess my question to you related to that is, how does a user ideally choose what data they want to give to what services? Because I think a lot of people want to cut it down to certain services, give more to certain services. And what's your thoughts around that, and how are you guys planning on handling that at Veritoken?
Well, so great question. I think from my perspective, I think just questioning what information you're being asked for is a really good place to start, because, like, you're at the register, you've just bought a shirt at Banana Republic, and they're like, can we have your phone number?
Okay.
And I always say, why?
Okay.
I don't care to be contacted by phone. I'm paying cash. Why do I need to give this phone number? And oftentimes they'll say, oh, for rewards, or for whatever, but they don't have a good answer. And sometimes they just say, we don't know. I don't give it. And so when it comes to being a consumer, you don't have to give all of that information unless you want it. So the way that I manage who's using and misusing my information is that I skew their data. So I create unique email addresses on the fly for almost every service that I use.
Interesting.
So I've been tracking for years. So I'll give you a great example. South by Southwest is my favorite conference.
It's a
ever.
Blast. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I've been going since I was, lived in Austin. So I've been going for a long time, and it's my festival. But when you go to the World Summit of Top Internet Marketers, you're going to get marketed to, right? So each year I create a unique email address, and so I can track year over year what the spam looks like, because some years are better than others. So there's that level where you don't give out, or you have a decoy email address, just one that you give when you sign up for coupons, or when you're signing a petition or whatever. If you don't have a service that you can create unique ones, you you just have one default one, and don't give everyone your main address. The other thing I like to do is I don't put my real information in social networks.
Okay.
Some people will go, oh, but you're violating terms of service. Big whoop.
Yeah, who cares? Yeah.
I don't give my real birth date to any service unless it is tied to my taxes or the government or a loan application or somewhere where I would be committing something against the law. Like, if I'm breaking the law, I'm going to give my real information, and I know I'm on a secured site. But anything else, who cares? So
that's actually really good advice.
Because why do you have to build their data set for them? Why? Why do you have to give them your real age? So Facebook thinks I'm 82.
Okay,
and
interesting.
I did this years ago because I noticed that they were targeting ads to me at the age I was at the time. This was like 10 years ago. So I shifted my age thinking, okay, we'll see what happens here. Because I was just honestly just tinkering.
Sure.
And oh my gosh, the ads for like rash creams and, you know, like emergency alerts. I mean, the marketing, it's better now, but oh my gosh, it was awful. Awful ads for seniors that were just, you know, and so it gave me a perspective of sort of how the ads were working.
Okay.
And so what was interesting is a couple months after I made that shift, even though I never put my mailing address in Facebook, I started getting Prevention Magazine.
Okay.
And like I started getting AARP flyers, and it was just like, oh my God. So it's really eye-opening when you make a conscious choice to skew data.
Yeah.
What they do with it. It's really interesting. And so I think you have to just challenge the notion from the outset that you don't have to give them what they're asking for. And that alone gives you more power because you're not blindly accepting what you're being told.
Yeah, I that's actually really interesting. And I guess my similar example to that is when my wife and I were expecting our first child, you start getting all this like samples in the mail about, you know, newborn stuff or diaper samples or whatever, right? And you're just like, wow, it's crazy when you don't think about the information that you've posted online, and then automatically you start getting this stuff physically in your mailbox, which is really quite interesting, right? And being able to control that or turn that off or is I think a really big thing that's coming in the near future, and you guys are building that.
Right. I mean, it's going to be a very long road, and it's going to involve a lot of partners and a lot of re-education, and just, you know, my biggest thing that I'm fighting is not, you know, technology. It's not the marketplace. It's apathy, because consumers are apathetic. You know, they don't trust Facebook, but they're not leaving it.
Yeah, I know. It's
you know,
interesting.
The network effect is all too real. And so I would love to say that Mastodon's going to come in and, you know, change everybody's world. But the thing is, it's not where we are today. And so the network effect is that, you know, when there's so many people on a platform, it's hard to get them off. And so that's really what they're banking on. So fighting against that mindset is really my biggest challenge.
Interesting. I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, because it is fascinating to me that a lot of people know, even including non-technical people, know about all the craziness that Facebook's gone through in the last couple of years. I literally tried to quit Facebook about this time last year, and I ended up having to go back to it because there's certain things that you just end up missing out on, whether it's events or group chats in WhatsApp. Like I tried to quit like WhatsApp, Instagram, and Facebook just because I don't really like what they're trying to do, and it was almost impossible to just you miss out on certain things, or you get the wrong information because you're not in the group chats. And it sounds kind of stupid thinking about it, but it actually started really affecting my life to the point where you're 30 minutes early for something, or you don't go to something and people are like, where were you? And you're like, what are you talking about? And so for me, that understands and doesn't like Facebook and the platforms that they own because of the privacy things, it's fascinating to me that you talk to somebody like my father-in-law, who posts all the time, loves Facebook, but still knows about all the security stuff and privacy issues they've been having. They don't seem to care, and clearly most people don't care because their last quarter was extremely profitable. So what is your thoughts on the industry as a whole, as somebody that's actually building to potentially let people control their data? Like, do people care? They care. and it's just they've accepted, or what are your thoughts around how people actually see these different companies and social networks?
I mean, I think most people don't worry about how the internet works. Okay. And it has long been an accepted adage in Silicon Valley that if you are not paying for the product, you are the product.
Sure.
And so I think while people, some people have their own things, like maybe they don't upload a picture with their face in it, or maybe they, there's certain people that won't participate in weird ways, like, in my own weird way with my skewing of the data.
Sure.
But I ultimately think that until there's an alternative, what is anybody going to be doing?
Sure.
I mean, what is anybody going to be doing that's not that? Because this is something as addictive, if not more so, than cigarettes.
Interesting.
And I read that article. I forget the gentleman who came up with the theory, but it blew my mind, because that's what it is.
Sure.
You step out, you're on the way to work. Oh, let me check Facebook. Let me check Twitter. Let me check Instagram. It's like you're looking for that shot of dopamine you get when you see that 3 more people liked your photo. And so it feels good to get validated. And so we've gamified our own lives. And so until we can A, either get over our addiction, or B, find a new one.
Yeah, interesting. No, that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, and so that's really what the shift needs to happen, is we have to either get fatigued and decide it's healthier for us. I mean, there are studies coming out now that are saying people feel less politically polarized when they get off of Facebook, or they feel less stressed. But, there's certain functions of the service that make it hard to give up, such as events and other things, right? So it's an interesting time, because I do think enough people are mad about it. I think if an alternative that felt reasonable was presented, I think people would go for it, but no one's really come up with that yet, because it's just so hard to get. You've got half the world or more on it.
Yeah.
People aren't gonna move unless it gives them something they want in a way that they understand.
Yeah, I agreed. But what is your thoughts then around, it seems like, to me anyway, social media came out to almost reconnect with people that you knew maybe earlier in life. And now that that's kind of come and gone, and you've chatted with the people a few times, and you realize, okay, well, this, we haven't talked in 10, 15, 20 years because, well, we just are different people now. Do you think that we're in a new kind of era of what social media or Facebook, for example, needs to become and move into more business tools, and that like the personal kind of aspect of some of the social media tools is kind of irrelevant now, or do you think it's very much relevant and the business side needs to get better? Or what's your thoughts on the actual landscape of where some of these social media tools are, or does it really depend on the actual network?
I mean, I think when technology is doing it right, it's helping people stay in touch with loved ones. It's, facilitating conversations that wouldn't have otherwise happened. That was already happening on the internet before Facebook.
Sure.
We had MySpace. Before MySpace, we had messaging. We had AOL Messenger. We had, all these other ways. I mean, I met my own husband over Telnet.
Interesting.
So
okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
A private Telnet-based chat system. So, the internet's been connecting people as long as it's been a thing. And so I think when it's done right, you should be able to meet people. But the thing is, there's always that element of trust that needs to come in. And so when you're meeting new people, so I used to accept almost anybody for Facebook requests if they look like a real person. But now if I don't really know them, I don't accept it anymore.
Interesting.
Because think about how much personal information you're putting in there. Do you really want some random stranger that you don't even know if it's them. So I think the fear looming into the platform because of all these, bot accounts, and there have been some pretty big scams in recent history with spoof accounts. I think people are a little more leery of discovery on Facebook, and that's okay, but that's a technology failing. If you can't trust, right, it's failing.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. And I think a lot more people are taking that approach, right? That they're kind of tightening their social media profiles and whatnot because of that, right? And I think it's only going to get potentially harder to connect with not random people, but just people you don't know that well, right?
Right. I mean, and also for business, it would be cool, and I've seen services like this pop up over the years. There was a really cool one, I forget what it was called, where you could schedule lunch with somebody during the day. And so I did when I was new here years ago. There was one of them that popped up, and so it was like LinkedIn lunch dates essentially. So you could say, here's who I want to meet, here's what I'm doing, here's what I'm working on, and be matched.
Interesting.
And so so the first few were fun, but then it got to be like, oh, an insurance broker, financial advisor, and they would kind of hide what they were doing, and so it was like it just became a way to get sold to. But I love that premise, because what's the danger in meeting someone for a lunch? And so I got to meet some interesting people that way and deepen my network. And so, social media done right will do that. It should accentuate what's happening offline. But the problem is right now, as consumers, we're consuming so much on these platforms that it's hurting our real life activities to a point as well.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. I think that's actually quite fascinating. So I'm curious to know, or to go back to the Veritoken side of things for a little bit and talk about some of the, maybe without getting too technical, I want to talk about the technology side of what you guys are building and how people could actually leverage that, whether it's personally or in their products or projects. Is that something you guys are thinking about or working on, or how does that kind of work?
Right. So yes to both. I have made the conscious choice to focus right now more on business to business and end consumers. And the reason is that consumer education is something I'm going to leave up to the Samsungs of the world, who have just installed a crypto wallet on their 10 phones. The new 10s are all coming out with a crypto wallet. That was huge. That was like a big game changer for a lot of people. And so I'm going to let the bigger companies go ahead and educate the marketplace while I work on building the plumbing. And somebody had shared this with me, one of our partners actually, on a phone, and he said, it's like everybody in blockchain has a house, but nobody has any plumbing. And
interesting. Okay.
Which I thought was a beautiful metaphor for kind of the ICO boom and bust. Was like, everybody had a front, but who was actually building things? And so we're really focused right now on working with our partners to deploy unique use cases to really test out what is working here and what isn't. And so I would be lying if I said there was one simple solution to everything. We've placed multiple bets in different markets, and so each implementation right now is a little different. But by focusing on business, then the consumers will come later on. As much as I want to solve their problems right now, I need to make money.
Fair enough.
So I feel like, in 2020, I think we're going to start to get more on the consumer side, getting people, really cool, usable apps. But until I can prove the use cases that I'm trying to, it really doesn't, it doesn't make sense to market outside.
Sure.
But, we all pivot quickly here in Silicon Valley, so I could be eating my words in a couple months.
One phone call,
but it's definitely it's in my roadmap. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. And I also think too, the thing that you brought up there that people might not have caught on to is like, if you get a bunch of businesses to partner with you, then it's easier for the business's clients and users to actually decide which data they want to share with that company. Is that an oversimplified version of what we're talking about?
No, it's not oversimplified at all.
Okay.
It's not oversimplified at all because, again, it's like you have to get people to buy in.
Yeah. Okay.
To and to buy into the concept of digital assets.
Sure.
Because not everything is a use case for blockchain.
Sure.
I think a lot of the, more hardcore people make the mistake of doing is acting like it's a Swiss Army knife. It's not. I mean, it can be in some ways, but there are certain use cases it's not ideal for. Like if you're certain types of supply chain, if you don't require a trustless network, like it may not be as smart to implement. So it's I don't know. I feel like I have nothing bad to say about blockchain. I don't want to imply that, but I think we have to be really clear in educating people about what this can do to enhance your life, because right now it's just words to people. They haven't seen it in action.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And I also think people haven't, like, I guess probably gamers, in my opinion, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that seem to very much obviously understand the digital asset space because they're always buying in-game gold or characters or whatever, and that stuff is valuable, and that's potentially tradable for other digital things in the physical world, a bit of both, maybe a cryptocurrency, maybe at some point a different currency. But I think the average person doesn't understand that yet. Do you agree with that, or what are your thoughts around that?
I would agree with you 100%. Yeah.
No, fair.
Yep.
But I think what I'm just, I guess, trying to get out of today's episode for the listeners, get them thinking about this stuff, right? And actually check out your technology and kind of follow what you guys end up doing over the next 6 months to a year, because it's got to be really challenging for somebody like yourself that's basically the first or one of the first companies that are actually trying to give people back control of their data and their privacy, right? And I think getting people to think about and understand that they actually have a choice and that they can control it is a weird thing to think about in today's, I guess I just have to give everything online. It's like, well, you don't, but I think most people don't see it like that. They've just kind of accepted the fact that if they want to use certain things, they have to basically give whatever these companies want from them. And that's not always the case. And with companies like Veritoken, you guys are basically saying like, well, that doesn't have to be the case any of the time. At least that's what you're trying to work towards. Is that fair to say?
Well, yeah. I mean, what we're trying to work towards is a shift in thinking and a shift in power, because you should be the one profiting off of your own information, not a centralized server. Yeah, not a centralized server that's collecting all your data and knows scary things about you. That's not how it should be. You should have the ability to say, this is mine, I own it, I'm going to get, I'm going to participate in this, this game here where I'm going to get, this many tokens for doing this. Or, it's a whole shift in thinking in the way that we interact with the world. And it could take a long time, but it's worth fighting for, because we should own who we are. We should own our names. We should own, our actions that we're taking. And feeling powerless is the worst way to feel. And that's where a lot of people are right now.
Sure. Is there anything other than the things we've talked about in today's episode that you recommend people do online? I think the actual thing of creating different email addresses and maybe giving different data that's true or maybe untrue about yourself to different services. But is there any other advice you give to people out there to at least get them thinking about when they're online?
Definitely. A couple of things I always suggest to people are, don't use Facebook, Google, Twitter as a login on a new site or service or an app, because then that gives that app carte blanche to view your data from the social networks and track you and follow you across a number of sites. So that's number one. I know it's a pain, but you got to create it with an email address of your choosing. Create the account from scratch so that you're not giving a site access to information that has nothing to do with what you're doing, right? And then another, thing is don't accept a friend request from somebody you're already friends with.
Interesting.
That's spoofing. And check with the person. Say, hey, is this you? Because sometimes it's somebody who got locked out and they just, create a new account. That's a handful of times, but majority of times it's a bot or it's a scam. And then the last thing would be whether or not you are in Facebook. If you've closed it, that pixel is following you all around the web.
Yeah.
So, I like to use different browsers. I would recommend using a browser that has privacy settings. You can go in secret mode and do certain things if you really want, like Mozilla or Brave. Like, these are alternative browsers. I also like Vivaldi. You don't have to use what comes on, installed on your computer. You can choose a browser that gives you more privacy options. You can install privacy plugins. Like, if you are working for it, you can get there. So I always tell people, just make yourself conscious of what you're giving away, and then, you can absolutely say no to something if you don't want to do it.
No, I think that's really good advice, but we're coming to the end of the show, so let's close with mentioning where people can get more information about yourself, the agency, and Veritoken, and the book, if you want to mention that as well.
Yes, absolutely. So I wrote an O'Reilly book a couple years ago called The SEO Battlefield, which, looking back, should probably have been titled The Startup Battlefield, because it's really about, how to scale a startup. And that's available on Amazon. And, the best way to find me is just search Anbot on any major service, Anbot, ANNEBOT, on Twitter or Instagram or any of those. I'm Anbot at everything. And then, Veritoken is veritoken.io. But, if you want to find me, I'm all over the internet. So that's awesome. Not a problem.
Very cool. Well, Ann, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be on the show, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed our discussion, and I hope we're going to take our power back.
I love it. Well, thanks again, and we'll talk soon. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. Please visit our website at buildingthefutureshow.com to join the free community, sign up for our newsletter, or to sponsor the show. The music is done by Electric Mantra. You can check him out at electricmantra.com and keep building the future.